Hello, everybody. It's nice to have so many passionate, engaged people in one room that share the, let's say, the ideal, utopian possibility that we can make space for life, for people, for everyday experiences, beautiful, smart, intelligent, functional, etc. And so I met tonight hundreds of designers. There's a lot of designers here. And I have a big question for all of you. Is there enough work for hundreds of designers? I hope so. Okay, speaking of that, when I enrolled in design school in Canada, there were 3 schools of architecture. And that's it. Today, there are 32. And in the United States, there's 173 schools for design and architecture. So there's a good and bad side to this. The good side, what happened over there? The good side is that design has become a public subject. What I mean by that is that everybody, doesn't matter what field they're in, they're interested in design. Whereas when I enrolled in school, very few people spoke about design. And in fact, if you used the word design, it meant fashion. And Metropolis magazine did something very interesting. 20 years ago in New York, they asked public people to name 3 designers, right? They asked 2,000 people in a survey to name 3 designers. 1,500 of those people couldn't name one. Isn't that amazing? The other 500 people named fashion designers. Nobody named an architect, an interior designer, a graphic designer, or whatever. Then, what was interesting, they asked 2,000 people to name architects. Everybody named 3 architects. Isn't that amazing? And guess who the number 1 architect was named by? And this is people who are not in the profession. So who was the number 1 architect that everybody chose? This is 20 years ago. Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, it doesn't matter what you pick up, what you read, what you look at, what you watch, but everybody uses the word design. And they use it, they misuse it. It's an abused terminology. Why is it an abused terminology? Does anybody know, I don't want to sound too pedantic, does anybody know where the word design comes from? French. Drawing. No. German, originally, and it's the program. So it means that if you have criteria, you develop a program. And then you solve the program, solve the criteria, and come up with a solution. So that's where it comes from. And it came from the Industrial Revolution. So it grew out of the Industrial Revolution because design was a way to create a program to produce a mass-produced product. And can you imagine, before the 1700s, products were craft. People made things one at a time by hand. There were no machines, no robotics, nothing. No CNC, no rapid prototyping, no fused deposition machine, nothing like the world we live in now. Because the world we live in now, right now, is so advanced. It's fascinating, actually, which I could talk about a whole nother subject about AI, what it can do in this profession, too. So the world has changed drastically since then. And if we look back 300 years ago, you realize a toilet didn't exist. Right? This is amazing. So basically, plumbing didn't exist. Electricity didn't exist. all these things. I don't know if you know, but in medieval times, you might know this, and this is chivalry for you. In medieval times, you had very narrow street, and you had a plank of wood where you would come out of your home, out of your apartment, with a hole cut in the middle, and you would basically shit on the street. And then at night, they would come and clean. Right? Can you imagine this? So what's beautiful about design is to look at the kind of human experience and the behavior, social behaviors, and how design has two proponents. One is that we can change behavior, human behavior. I can design a product that would make people have a task or do something differently and new, right? That's one way to shape design. You could design a space that makes people behave or experience differently. So you change, really, culture. Design is cultural shaping. You shape culture. The other way is that you revisit or you notice a social behavior and you address it. For example, if you're at a bus stop, right? And you notice the social behavior of people standing at the bus stop and they don't have a bench to sit on. And in most cities, you don't want a bench because the homeless will lie on the bench, right? So someone developed, and I think it was beautiful, and this goes back to the 1950s, something to perch on. You know what I mean? So the seat is only like that, you know? So you can, like that, right? So that person who invented or thought about that idea thought about the idea because they studied the way we live. So, why am I talking about this? Because the biggest problem that a lot of you face, that I face in design, is that we get pushed a lot of times into decorating, not designing. And there's a big difference between being a decorator and a designer. So the decorator picks, chooses, places things, styles, right? The word style itself means that it's not at all about addressing social human behaviors, about the time we live in, nothing. It means that you are just doing something that you could argue superfluous. You could even argue even kind of kitsch in a way. The word kitsch, you know the word kitsch? Everybody knows the word kitsch, yeah? German word. Yeah? What's the meaning of kitsch? Something what? Something ugly. No. Something tacky. Is there a kind of Romanian equivalent word for kitsch? You just use kitsch? Okay. Kitsch is a cheap replica of the authentic. So in other words, if you have a little light that's Jesus Christ, it's a cheap replica of the authentic, right? Okay, this is interesting. If you buy a knockoff of a chair that Philip Stark designed, it's kitsch. Why? It's the cheap replica of the authentic. Yeah? So kitsch, in a way, you could argue, is becoming a kind of landscape in the world where what we're doing is we're just copying and copying and copying things that have already been done in the past, right? Philosophically, there was a French philosopher, Jean Baudrillard, talk about simulacra, simulation. We live in simulation, that we make copy of copy of copy of copy. So your question is, where's the original? What is the original? Now, if you're a designer, you need to try to force yourself to do something original. Why? Now, I will say in this day and age, it's very hard to do something original. Why is it very hard? If I decide to design, I work for a company that makes bent plywood furniture. And I Google bent plywood furniture. I will see thousands of bent plywood chairs. How are you going to do something original if you do that? And then you look at something and it goes into the conscious, moves to what we call the monkey brain, down into the subconscious, and then 6 months later, you think that what you're doing is original. And I'm a culprit of that. I know very well, I've analyzed very well things I've done where I at one time thought it was an original idea and it was not. And I even trace back where it came from. Now, so because of this day and age we live in, it's harder and harder to do something original. Why? Because of information age. Because we are bombarded with information. Like, there's just so much imagery out there. It's incredible. As of 4 years ago, because I haven't Googled this in a long time, 1.4 billion photographs are done a day. Per day. Now, if there's 2 billion smartphones in the world, 2 billion, every smartphone only needs to take one picture that day, and you put in the cloud 2 billion images. Think about that. Think about how when Richard Avedon in 1979 was shooting Giselle, how few people took photographs compared to the amount that we take today, the amount of imagery. At that time, Richard Avedon or Stephen Meisel, any of those fashion photographers, what's his name, which I love, Helmut Newton, those guys had so little competition and so few people were in the profession, right? And for sure, they weren't sitting there Googling, oh, I'm going to make black and white nude photo. Right? They were inventing. They were pushing themselves. Every day was what's the word? The desire, the desirous need to just find something new. And not find something new only, but to find something from you. From your soul. And why from you? Because you are original. Because there's no one else like any of us. Every one of us are completely different. Which is why I never understood why 10,000 years of humanity and we've all been pushed and pushed and pushed to conform. We've been suppressed. Mass culture globally has been suppressed for 10,000 years. To all act, be the same. But we're not the same. The iris, right, repeated 1 in every 12 billion. That means your iris may be repeated after you're long gone in another generation. Maybe. Maybe never. So you are completely original. Your fingerprint's original. Everything about you is original. Your DNA, your hair, your genome, all original. Right? So why don't you do something original? It's a very simple question. Why? You know why? Because A, it takes rigor. It takes you to tell yourself in your mind that I am going to do something original. Point one. You have to say that. You have to go to sleep at night, and you wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to go to the office, and I'm going to do something original. Number two, we're in a commercial field. And the problem with a commercial field versus being a painter or an artist is you have a whole bunch of people that are telling you what to do. You have your client. Is the biggest problem in a way. You know how many designers say to me, oh, well, the reason I do this kind of work is because my client, he's kind of a conservative, classical guy, and blah, 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 and they tell me these stories. And every time I hear those kind of stories from interior designers, I think to myself, your responsibility to tell that guy how the world is changing, why he should go with this new direction, build up his ego or her ego to say, imagine if you do this, you would be the only one to have an apartment like this. Imagine if you do this, this would be the only hotel in the world could be like this. But it's your responsibility to do this. So that's number two. Okay? Number three, there's things like budget and all that other stuff. But budget is irrelevant. You know when people say, the reason I don't I can't really dress well is because I don't have money. That has nothing to do with money, right? Same thing with a space. Space has nothing to do with money. You can do something original in here tomorrow on a very low budget if you want. But again, you have to push yourself. Rigor. 4, you have to get out of the paradigms and pre-associations that everybody falls into. A very simple example. If you go to a restaurant and the floor is wood, you will see after 3 months that the floor is destroyed. So the question is, why do you put a wood floor in a restaurant? Why? Because you're not thinking, because you're not pushing yourself, because you're just doing what everybody else is doing. And then you say, oh, well, wood is warm. Well, there's a lot of warm materials. In fact, there's better materials. You know why there's better materials? Go to a restaurant, and you can't even a lot of times hear the person that's sitting beside you. Why? Acoustics, right? Because you designed the restaurant with style, and you don't understand the fact that you need to absorb sound. So make a floor that absorbs sound. I'm making a restaurant in Rome now, and I made the floor, which I make in my apartment many years ago, ballet floor, that they use for the ballet. Why? Because you can get it in 60 colors, and the seams you don't see because they weld the seam with a machine. So it looks like one plane. Beautiful. But because it's soft, when people walk, you don't hear shoes, and it absorbs sound. Great material. Much cheaper than a wood floor. So why don't we think this way? Why are we not educated to think that we don't look at what's being done, but we focus on what we can do today? Because today has nothing to do with the past. And your life and my life and everybody exists at this moment in time only. And actually, history and the past is becoming more and more irrelevant. Why is it becoming irrelevant? Because the digital age, which is new, 40 years old, is giving us experiences that we could have never dreamed of in the last 10,000 years of existence. It's incredible what we can do. So simply, instead of Googling restaurants or a hotel lobby so you can see what other people did, or a hospital interior because we want to see what other people did. No. What you do is you use this. Read. Observe. See how people operate. Watch people's behaviors. Watch people in restaurants, how they eat and talk to each other. Last night I was in the Pompidou in Beaubourg, and I don't know if you know the restaurant at the top of Beaubourg, if anybody's been there. But the tables are tables for 2, and they're so close together, and they were entirely full, and people are beside strangers trying to have dinner and trying to have a conversation. And if you think about that, they're having a conversation with someone that's further away than the person beside them, right? So inevitably, the person beside them hears their conversation more than the person across from them. Do you think about this thing when you design a restaurant? I don't think anybody thinks about these things. And yet they're so fundamental, so simple, so pragmatic, right? But the opportunity, look at the opportunity. If you want to do something original, you see that, and then you work with it and think, hey, I got an idea. How can I separate those tables a little bit? So I'm going to tell you a little scenario of a project in Rome, restaurant. It's an old building, 5 stories, hotel. And the Pantheon is really close by. It's a beautiful neighborhood. Up on the roof, closed in, is the restaurant. And there's a balcony, quite deep. And because the building is, of course, landmark, the balcony has a not a railing, what would you call it? The cornice, the wall, solid stone, and quite high. So the people sitting outside and in the restaurant can't even see the Pantheon. Because if you're sitting like this, here's the wall, right? So I thought, how can I get people to see Rome? And I remember a story. When I arrived in Rome for the first time, when I was going to do my master's in Italy, I was staying in a tiny little pension for, I don't know, $4 a night, little hole in the wall, and I needed to use the bathroom, and it's a shared bathroom. And I went to the front and I said, where's the bathroom? He said, go to the roof. So I go up on the roof, and there was a wood bridge that I walked on, and then a square wooden box with the toilet in it. So I walk on, I get on the toilet, and as I sit on the toilet, I realized, look at Rome. I saw the Spanish Steps. It was amazing. I never sat on the toilet longer in my life. Until someone knocking needed the toilet. I was like, oh, okay. So I thought about that. I thought, oh, so I'm in the restaurant. If I make the ceiling mirror, but I tilt the ceiling, then the people sitting here will see Rome. The people sitting here, if I tilt the other one, will see Rome. So we designed the restaurant so the entire ceiling, sorry, I did it this way. You could do it the other way. I did it this way, right? So you're sitting here, you see Rome, Rome, right? Now when you tilt the mirror ceiling like that, you end up with a line. So what can I do with that line? How beautiful. I make the line light. Why? Because then I put the buffet for the breakfast down the middle where the light is. And everybody sitting can see Rome. But still there's a problem. Because some people are sitting this way to see Rome, the people sitting this way don't. So what do? I make the chairs with wheels. Now, have you ever been to a restaurant with chair with wheels? Why do you use wheels in the office but not in the restaurant? Because the office archetype has 5 wheels. Yet most of the time, people barely use those wheels. Most of the time, they're facing the computer and then they're getting up. You're not like rolling around the office, right? So this is the problem with our life is we see everything as archetypes. If I design a hospital needs to be like this. If I design a restaurant, it needs to be like, office looks like this. But we now know all this is blurring, right? You go to the office, it starts to look like a home or whatever. Everybody's like trying to cross boundaries. Why are we crossing boundaries? Because we're thinking about social human experiences and behaviors. That's why we're crossing boundaries. We're realizing, oh, the office doesn't really need a desk because you don't use a desktop computer, you have a laptop. So what do? You can go sit over here with your laptop and work, right? So we changed the office paradigm a lot. But for some reason, the domestic home is not changing. And many, many other contexts are not changing because we are not changing them, and we are the ones to make the change. Because we change social behavior, and we change the way people behave, and we change this world. And design isn't about designing a chair or a piece of jewelry or a mobile phone or a building. Design is about also designing systems. Design is designing a politics. Design goes on and on and on, but basically the whole world evolves, progresses through design. We shape the future. If I'm going to do a hotel and it's going to take 2 years, I can't look at things that are happening now because 2 years from now things are different. So you need to project yourself, observe what's happening, and almost predict the way things can move. And if you critique these things and say, how can I make a better life? How can I make someone enjoy the experience in the restaurant? A good example of enjoying experience in a restaurant is, if you're sitting here at the table and the light comes from here, you have shadow all in your face and you look terrible. You want to look beautiful? The light has to come from here. Yeah? Okay, go to a restaurant, show me any restaurant where they put the light here. But you know, years ago, we used to put the light there because people put candles on the table. So replace the candle with some idea for light, something, right? You could do something really nice. I made restaurant 20 years ago for a Japanese guy in Philadelphia, still there, perfect, works perfect. And it looks like a candle, but it's a lamp. And the people at the table can touch it and dim it or turn it off and do what they want with it. But the lighting, I thought so much about the lighting because I wanted people to look better. Okay? Restaurant, I put all big acoustic panels under the tables, big cone, under all the tables to absorb all the sound. Very easy and very simple idea. Why? What I realized is, if you make something function well, you can then go wild and do whatever you want because people can't criticize it. And people criticize if I go wild, but it doesn't work. Anyway, everything I'm talking about is design. And everything I'm talking about has nothing to do with the past and nothing to do with history. Nothing. If I design today a biodegradable, injection molded stacking chair, right? And it's made of a polymer, the right polymer, all this. All the criteria that goes into that chair is present. New material, new production method, new technology. I think about picking it up or how you stack it. I think about total comfort. Maybe I make it a bit flexing, the plastic, because if it's not flexing, you start getting your circulation cut and it's uncomfortable. All those things are present criteria, right? They have nothing to do with the past. I didn't say, oh, I'm going to go look in history and copy from the 1900s. I'm going to go to the style of Baroque or minimalism or epoch or brutalism or this or that. No. So why don't we think about space the same way? We don't need to go back into history and copy and make fake kitsch at the end is what you're doing of something that is relevant to the day and age in which we live. And the beauty of the day and age in which we live is, and I'm going to just end on this term, because this is very important. We're destroyed the earth in 180 years. Destroyed it. We're killing ourselves and the planet. So how do we bounce back? You know how we bounce back? Consume less. Adolf Loos. Was it Adolf Loos said less is more? Who said less is more? I think Adolf Loos said it. Google. Somebody Google. Quick. Mies van der Rohe? Should have trusted you. Mies van der Rohe. Less is more. Today, this has more meaning than ever because we are having more interesting, better experiences with nothing, with digital information, with digital connections, right? With satellites, with binary notation, with bits, right? Zeros and ones, than we are with physical things. Which means we actually need less and less physical. But yet, life is getting more and more interesting. The internet has no boundaries and borders. It's completely democratic. It has no identity. And one day, all these countries won't have borders or boundaries or identities because identity is not important anymore because that was part of the past. What's important is your own identity, individualism. In other words, the differentiation of the whole human race used to be about run by pharaohs and kings and dynasties, right? It was about countries, creeds, religions, politicians. But you know what? Now it's just about each and every one of us. So one day you'll say, I'm different than you, you're different than her. Da, 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 da. Not, oh, I'm Romanian, I'm Russian, I'm American, I was joking the other day when I told a friend, but I realized it's true. If you look at sports, right? Most sports teams, the players that are on them don't even come from the country they're playing for. So why on earth do you think, oh, go New York Giants? When the guy, the best basketball player is Jamaican, you know? Right? So the world is going to change drastically. And it has to change. And why it has to change? Why do we need to dematerialize? Think about this when you design space. Do we need a lot of these things? Like this is a shelf. But is anybody really going to use that? Do you know what I mean? In fact, shelves, do people even really use them anymore? Books are gone. It's a reality. You can say, oh, but I love books. That's what people say to me. You love books because you were brought up with them. But my daughter's not brought up with them. It's gone. All she does is read ebooks. Everything is digital for her. The next generation will be more digital, more digital, more digital. And why? It's great. Because printing those books with toxic inks and the amount of stuff that we make that we do not need anymore will save the planet. And that's the agenda, the master plan of whoever. But the master plan is not to rely on oil, not to print, not to put tons of toxics in the world. 1 out of 4 people in the world get cancer. Now, okay, 100 years ago, 1 out of 100 had cancer. So where's the cancer coming from? It's kind of obvious. You know the cancer is in your makeup, and it's in your toothpaste, and it's in all this shit around us. So we got to get smart, get rid of this stuff, and what is the last agenda that's probably the most important part of humanity? To make a beautiful world. And beauty is inseparable from humanity. We have been obsessed with beauty since the beginning of mankind. So the way to make something beautiful is to make something that is responsible for the earth. The way to make something beautiful is to make something that is experiential, enjoyable, elevates the pleasure, makes someone want to live in the space, makes someone want to enjoy and engage the world. That's beautiful. I want to say one thing. Where's Claudia? Where are you, Claudia? If it wasn't for this fantastic woman, I wouldn't be here. So, thank you. And I want to say this too, that I haven't had an opportunity to speak live like this in 2 years. And I pray to energy, which is what I believe in, that this whole crisis is over, number 1. And number 2, that there's going to be some sort of world peace. And the way the world peace is going to happen is to get some savvy, smart, 30-year-old people in politics everywhere in the world and get rid of the entire old guard and 20th century thinking. It's gone. It has nothing to do with the day and age in which we live in. Biden, Trump, doesn't matter. Putin, all these people, they are not making the world. They don't live in the present. They live in the past. The best thing you can do as being someone creative is to live in the present. You live in the present, you'll stay young forever. Number 1. I'm turning 62 soon. Okay? You live in the present, you stay young. And you live in the present, and then you can respond and do great things. And that's what we all want to have some sort of meaning in life, that at the end of the day, you want to feel like you did something that contributed to others, right? The greatest reward I have is not that I have my work in the MoMA. Greatest reward I have is somebody who knows nothing about design comes up to me and says, you know, I was staying in a hotel you designed and I had the greatest experience. How great. I feel, I know I touch other people's lives. And design can be like that, like a good song, lyrics that will live with us forever. You do something good, you touch a lot of people's lives, right? So go out there and touch a lot of people's lives. Thank you.